Coming up next on The Voice of Alabama Politics, Coach Dye says, let the people vote. Also, the V-Team takes a look at Justice Moore's comments. And Mike Hubbard was hauling in millions while the state was going broke. Now that gives a whole new meaning to storming the State House there, Mikey. All this and much, much more coming up next on The V.
The Voice of Alabama Politics, with your host, Bill Brett, and the V-Team with Claire Austin, Susan Britt, Jack Campbell, Baron Coleman, Charlana Spencer, and special reports with Jonathan Barbie. Now, the #1 political show in Alabama, The V.
Welcome to The Voice of Alabama Politics, where we tackle the tough issues so you have the hard facts. I'm your host, Bill Britt, and as always, I'm joined by the V-Team. Welcome all.
Good morning. I hope y'all had a good 4th of July.
We did.
Excellent 4th of July. Lots of fireworks.
Well, what happened to everybody else's red, white, and blue?
I've got blue and white.
You got your Auburn
I've got
colors.
blue. It's Auburn color.
Okay.
Yeah. Close enough.
I'm blue.
I guess I'm the
Blue
only
and
fresh
white.
Republican. That's all right. Let's go.
Well, you know, this week, Coach Dye, speaking of your alma mater and
Amen.
yours, sent a letter to all the state legislators asking them to support the Marsh Plan. He explained his reasoning for being for the plan and asked others to join in letting the people vote on this constitutional amendment. Claire, what do you think about it?
Well, I mean, I think that, you know, he's expressed his heartfelt personality and his thought on this process. I think it's good. I mean, if you're an Alabama fan, you may not appreciate Pat Dye. Of course, I'm an Auburn fan, so I think we either needed to get a former coach from Alabama to weigh in as well. But I think it's quite interesting because Coach Dye has been so close to Mike Hubbard over the years, but he knows what Mike Hubbard is proposing is not what's best for this state. So I think that's a bigger issue.
And that's the story.
Yeah, that's the story right there.
It's not Auburn or Alabama. It's Dye and Hubbard.
Right.
And everybody knows Dye and Hubbard were business partners. They're very close. Dye brought Hubbard to Alabama. Take exception to that later, but he, you know, it's interesting.
But it's not, but, you know, speaking of that, it's not uncommon that Dye would get involved in political things and political races because he has done that since he's been out of the head coaching job at Auburn. He's been active in a lot of different things.
And whether you're
over
an
the years.
Alabama or Auburn fan, it doesn't matter. Pat Dye is a legend in the state. Okay, that's a big pull.
That's right, like Gene Stallings and many
Exactly.
others like that.
Well, he said at the press conference, it's not about the Auburn family or the Alabama family. It's about our state family.
That's right. And
Well,
he's
Susan,
correct.
you talked to the coach for probably a good half an hour. I mean, he was very passionate.
He's extremely passionate about this issue. He really wants to see it pass. He's concerned, you know, about the health of the state. He says, you know, I love this state. I love it so much, and it's in a crisis. And I really want, you know, he wants to get out. Now, he won't be lobbying directly with the legislators. They'll have people that are doing lobbying. But I think his passion will catch fire with those lobbyists.
Baron, we're hearing that some more high-powered business groups are coming on. I don't know who, but we're hearing some big muscle is getting ready to jump on this plan.
Well, as soon as it was announced at BCA, I'm sorry, that was the game changer. Because to me, it shows the business community was not going to oppose it. And if they weren't going to oppose it, they weren't going to sit on the sidelines. They're going to come in favor of it eventually. They may not have come out immediately, but they were eventually going to come in. If the Alabama Jobs Foundation lines up with some really big hitters, some really big hitting businesses, I think it's going to cause some of these legislators that are sort of on the fence right now to jump on board.
Well, that's what we're hearing behind the scenes, and a lot of folks are behind this, and there are going to be some big names. I mean, Charles McCrary and Raymond Hubbard are not small names in the business
Well,
community.
that was what I was
going
going to say. When you get the former CEO of the power company, and they don't call it the power company for no little reason, and people like Raymond Hubbard, you know, top 500 in America, wealthiest men, I mean, they're a true businessman across the state. And I think the one thing, you know, let's don't lose sight of this. They're just asking these legislators to vote for this plan to give the people the option and the right to vote. So, you know, I don't want people throwing stones at their legislators. Oh, well, they're pro-gambling. No, they are pro-letting you as a citizen of the state of Alabama have the opportunity to vote on this issue. And I think that's very important.
It's a big point, and that's one, I don't want to beat up on Governor Bentley too much, but Governor Bentley told me to my face that if the legislators brought it up, he would let it go to a vote of the people. Now he says he doesn't want it to go to a vote of the people. You know what, and one of the things that's just driving me crazy, Barron, there was a full-page ad in last Sunday's newspaper. The Porch Creek Indians, who I adore some of those folks. Some of them are like family. Excuse me. But they put a full-page ad in there saying they would advance the state $250 million, but they didn't mention that they wanted the monopoly to gaming. Sounds a lot like a bribe, doesn't it?
Well, it does. And a caller to our radio show this week brought up a great point. If Bentley is opposed to gambling on a moral basis, why is he even considering taking $250 million from gambling to bail out the state budget? I mean, that's cognitive dissonance 101. You cannot reconcile those two.
Well, and also, I didn't think, that as a state entity could borrow money or take money from a private entity and pay back. You cannot get in business like that. I don't think that doesn't smell good. It doesn't look good. And this whole idea of monopoly is just wrong. I mean, I would say probably 80% of the legislators, they may not be for gambling, but they certainly are not for the Indians having a monopoly.
I mean, Susan, if you had $250 million, do you think you could take our business to the governor and get him to?
I don't think so.
You don't think people would buy that as a good idea?
No.
So probably thinking, I was talking to Senator Dick Brubaker, who's opposed to this idea. Brubaker said the attorneys they talked to said it's just absolutely illegal to take that money.
Well, excuse me, and when have some of our elected officials thought doing things illegal was a problem?
Or voting for people who do things that are
Yeah, voting for people who do things illegally.
And if this is a loan, what's the collateral?
Right.
Right. But the bigger issue is, as Republicans, and we have a Republican-controlled House, a Republican-controlled Senate, and a Republican governor, let's put all of the gaming on the issue and let the free market decide. Let's put it out there and let the market decide, and not just go pick 3 and 4 things. Open it up and let the citizens and the people decide. We are Republicans, and I thought we believe in the free market.
Well, that's what I understood. But sometimes the Republicans in Alabama strike me more like central planning in Moscow. That's how they do things. I want to change this up. We got about a minute and a half left. We reported on a study this week about the best states for moms and dads, for working moms and dads, the conditions there. Susan, Alabama ranked 48th for working moms and 44th for working dads. I mean, we're ranking at the bottom of the barrel once again.
For working moms, we rank 48th. Child care, 46. Professional opportunities, 38. Some improvement there. Work-life balance, 42. While working dads are 44 for their working dad life.
I mean, Claire, you're a working mom. You're doing pretty well, but I mean, it's not the easiest
I would say,
for
I
her.
guess I maybe could be a poster child. Yeah, it's very difficult. There's no question about it. I'm a full-time working maybe 2 or 3 jobs with 3 children. It's not, you have to have serious time management, and you have to have a lot of help, and, you don't have a whole lot of free time for your own self when you're doing all this.
It's just not working for our folks.
5 years after the Republican takeover that we all took so much hope in, we have the worst economy in the United States. It doesn't surprise me that we rank last on something like this.
One of the girls that works with us at home, she has to have a second job to pay for the child care to be able to work her first job.
Well, we're going to have to leave it right there. We want to take a moment to remember Representative Dan Williams from Athens, who passed away this week. He will be missed. We'll be right back.
Sadly, this happens too often in families with autistic children.
Worst nightmare, their child wanders off, disappears, and is nowhere to be found.
Where her body was found just a couple hours ago.
An autistic boy wanders away from home and dies.
Welcome back to the V, the voice of Alabama politics. Welcome, Jack.
Thanks, guys.
Good to have you back. Did you have a good Fourth?
I did indeed.
Okay, you must have got all your red, white, and blue clothes dirty.
I did.
Okay.
People ask me what I had for lunch. I say, look at my shirt.
Wow. Okay. Well, there's been a lot of controversy about the Confederate flag coming down. A lot of pros, a lot of cons. There was a rally last week in response. They wanted to meet with Governor Bentley. He wasn't around to meet with them, but they were there. Let's take a look at some of that rally.
We've been watching what's been happening across the nation, South Carolina, other states. It's been an attack on our heritage quickly. We found that when people try to move quickly, then they don't really believe in what they're doing. And we knew this could be a possibility would happen here. So we wanted to throw this together just to show our support that we're still going to stand for our history.
We're here to honor our heritage, our ancestors, the people, the men and women that died to defend Alabama for what they knew was right. That's not a government flag. I mean, there was the stars and bars, then there was the stainless banner, and then there was the Third National. Those were government flags. And yes, I still fly those too because I believe in what the Confederacy believed in, states' rights. The right for the state to govern themselves under a limited federal government.
There are a lot of people that feel very strongly that it's an offensive message that's sent by the battle flag. Jack, I don't disagree that it was taken down. I disagree with the way it was taken down.
I don't have a beef with Governor Bentley taking it down. The battle flag, does represent some things to people that they find offensive. I don't know why we can't, in taking the battle flag down, replace it with the real Confederate flag that was not flown in Virginia and what was the other place, Tennessee. I don't see what's wrong with that. But I think Bentley just went off half-cocked, as he's done lately on a few things, and didn't consult with people to ask the best way to do it. And you pointed out the way they mishandled the flags. It's sacred to a lot of people who lost ancestors in that war.
Yeah, we won't talk the merits of the war, but when people die, people are passionate about it. I mean, Claire, you're fairly passionate about it.
I'm fairly passionate, right? And I had a lot of ancestors that fought in the war and everything else. And I just, once again, it is part of our history and our heritage. And I don't think you're going to erase that from the Alabama history books, the American history books, the battles all across the southern states and Fort Sumter and all that. I mean, you're not going to do that. Now, I just think that people have gone on top. I think really and truly they should put the original Confederate flag up there. You just cannot take all this from history.
When's it going to stop? I hear from a lot of folks.
Well, and there is the issue. Because I don't have a problem with him taking it down from the Capitol grounds. He's the governor. He has the ability to put them up, take them down, whichever flags he wants to fly. The problem is they canceled Dukes of Hazzard from TV land. I mean, we've gone into the realm of the absurd.
Yeah.
That hurts your heart.
It hurts my heart, but it shows how ridiculous this whole thing's become.
Right. I mean, if you can't have the General Lee shown on television, that orange car with the flag on top.
Yeah, that's absurd.
It's just taking it.
Are we going to stop having civil rights marches? What if, there are a lot of people that are offended by that, too.
I agree. Or are we going to rip the names off of all these Jeff Davis high schools all across central Alabama and Robert E. Lee high schools? And are we going to go in every little small town where there was a battle fought and pull every Confederate monument and grave out? I don't think so. I don't want my ancestors being pulled up.
Well, we heard this week that Birmingham, the Parks and Recs folks have decided to get rid of the monument there at
Lynn Park.
Lynn Park. I mean, this is I see one cause here, and I see another effect.
There's dominoes rippling, and I think there's another issue there. It wasn't on the agenda. Was it part of an Open Meetings Act, and they just did this without anybody knowing anything about it?
Barron, this is a lot like ISIS, isn't it?
It reminds me of ISIS and Al-Qaeda. They move into an area, they see a temple, a church they don't like, they explode, they blow it up, they crumble it. A Confederate monument being somewhere in a park or in a museum or wherever it is, that is part of our history.
They're not tearing down
flying
Auschwitz.
A flag that has racist connotations is different.
They're not tearing down memorials to the 6 million Jews.
No,
in Germany.
But I mean, if you can't distinguish between those two things, a flag that's become a racist symbol and a monument to a historical event, right. you have mental issues.
Well, it's just, like you said, with the Dukes of Hazzard, we're bordering on the absurd. Roy Moore does not lack controversy lately. Once again, he made some statements at a church service at the Kimberly Church of God. The media acted like most of the statements were made by him. He was actually quoting Justice Scalia, Justice Thomas, and
Justice Alito.
Now, this is on the same-sex marriage issue.
Yeah, this was on the same-sex marriage issue. Let's go to that church service and watch a clip.
Just 2 days after the Supreme Court ruling on gay marriage, Alabama Chief Justice Roy Moore spoke to the congregation at Kimberly Church of God about the recent ruling, the future of Alabama, and the future of our nation. Kimberly Church of God held their annual God and Country Day, and Alabama Chief Justice Roy Moore was their guest speaker again. This was the first time Justice Moore commented publicly since the gay marriage ruling 2 days earlier.
Our forefathers came to this land. They established a nation under God. They established a nation upon the laws of nature, and of nature's God. And I was so pleased to note that Justice Thomas cited that laws of nature and laws of God in his writings on this opinion. And by the way, as the justices in the dissent pointed out, there's no word about marriage or same-sex marriage in the Constitution. It's not there. And I do so because I want you to understand this is not my opinion. This is the opinion of Chief Justice Roberts, Justice Scalia, Justice Thomas, Justice Alito, to which I agree. Justice Roberts said the fundamental right to marry does not include the right to make a state change its definition of marriage. So welcome to the new world. It just changed for you Christians. It's a time now where you're going to be persecuted according to the United States Supreme Court dissent, but it's a wonderful time for Christianity.
Will religion be attacked? Will churches be sued? What are the next steps? Justice Moore explains.
Well, I think that the dissent very aptly pointed out, Justice Alito particularly, that this decision is going to be used by those who wish to take away religious freedom and vilify Americans, and be used by those who want to stamp out any dissent. Rehearing is, I think, 25 days in the Supreme Court of the United States if they grant one, and it would have to be new issues not argued. I think that hasn't played out yet. Their opinion doesn't become effective immediately, and of course the Alabama Supreme Court has an opinion out there and an injunction which they'll have to address.
Chief Justice tells us that it will take some time for this ruling to take effect, but he said be prepared. There will be lawsuits filed all over the country and right here in Alabama. Reporting from Kimberly Church of God, I'm Jonathan Barbie for the Voice of Alabama Politics.
Whether you agree with Roy Moore or not, I think the media has a responsibility to get the quote straight. And this event was not planned for this. It was planned long before this.
Way in advance.
And, Justice Moore, church service, pretty much say what he wants to.
I might be the dissident here. I was around and working at administrative office of courts when the canons of judicial ethics were rewritten in about 1995. I just don't think that jurists should be making statements about cases. I just don't. And I think he's gone over the top. Once again, I have a lot of respect for Judge Moore, but I really think he needs to be very careful in what he says and be more tempered. I'm sorry, but I don't agree with what, even he's reading the opinion. Why is he in a church reading the Supreme Court opinion about same-sex marriage? I know it's his freedom of speech too, but he's also a judge and he has a higher standard.
Well, I think that was one of the things that I wanted to point out. It wasn't him necessarily speaking.
Well, and we saw the consequence of him doing this before when he had to recuse himself from the probate judge's court case a few months ago. So it's not without its consequences. It is a borderline issue on the judicial ethics thing. I do think it's important to point out this was scheduled 6 months ago at the Kimberly Church of God. It was a God and Country Day. They do it every year right before July 4th. It just so happens their featured speaker is so outspoken on gay marriage, and a gay marriage decision came down 2 days before.
Well,
And he can't help that. But what I'll say as a politician, and everybody has valid points, but you know what? There's one thing about Judge Roy Moore. He has a belief and he doesn't deviate from it. And so I respect him for that.
We're going to have to leave it right there. You're watching The V, controversy all the time this past week. We'll be right back.
The V is sponsored by Spot On Strategies Group.
Welcome back to The V, the voice of Alabama politics. Jack, we learned the last couple of weeks that Speaker Mike Hubbard raked in over $2.3 million illegally, according to the state's Attorney General's office. Just as Speaker, contracts he had over a 2-year period, he hauled in over $700,000 illegally, according to the state's Attorney General. Shouldn't people be outraged?
Yeah, and certainly not surprised. It is absolutely, Claire, what's the word?
It's egregious, and the greed factor never stops with this man.
Execute contracts that benefited himself during a session while he held the gavel from companies that he consulted with when clearly he was lobbying for them.
Right.
And you know, look at Greg Wren.
Good point.
Greg Wren avoided jail time by resigning on one issue. And that was that amendment that benefited Mike Hubbard. I don't know how he escapes.
I mean, Claire, $750 in 2 years is a lobbying thing. That's pretty good, or 18 months.
That's a pretty nice gig, particularly for the Speaker of the House. I mean, I just have never known a Speaker of the House of Alabama do something like this.
Ben, what are you hearing from folks?
I'm hearing a lot of people are starting, I mean, the worm is turning. Public opinion is turning against Mike Hubbard as more and more stories get written. More and more of the mainstream press picks up some of these stories. Every hearing date, it seems like something bad happens to Mike Hubbard. I mean, I joked a few months ago that Mark White is the gift that keeps on giving to the anti-Hubbard crowd. And it just becomes more and more true every time you open a newspaper.
You know, I was talking to a couple of legislators this last weekend, and they went, he made how much money sitting there as Speaker? I mean, and one of them said, hey, he was crying poor over here to Bill.
Well, to the former governor.
And all that. He's making $700,000, Claire.
The average person can't even begin to relate to that, the average voter in the state of Alabama.
Well, it's 18 times what the average family gets.
Put yourself on the jury in October in Lee County, and you're making $42,000 a year working your tail off somewhere, and you read these emails where he's crying poor, whining about it, and he's making $200,000 legally between his wife and him off the state with state insurance. Right. And then he's making another $750,000 illegally and crying poor. You think they're going to like him?
I don't see how the people are going to buy that.
Yeah,
and it's been interesting. I spent a little time over in Lee County just for whether kids' reasons or social reasons, and run into a lot of people that live over there. And I just kind of was trying to prick their conscience and ask them. They said, well, you know, everybody's really loved Mike Hubbard over there, but people are beginning to question all this because they said this greed factor and all of this is just too much.
2.3 plus.
While the state is sucking wind.
Yeah, we're broke.
We're broke. And they've known it. They've known it the entire 4 years since 2010 when they were first elected. They knew then we had budgetary woes. And they put a Band-Aid on it. They robbed the trust fund. And now we got to pay the piper. And they're all sitting around twiddling their thumbs like, what are we going to do? Can't even get a budget passed in a session.
Well, Mike wasn't having
he
any
was busy
problem
worried
with
about his own stuff over there. And if he was a true statesman like these other men, as I'm going to state it again for the viewers out here, and South Carolina, North Carolina, New York, and Indiana, the speakers and the pro tem in one of those states in Indiana, they had problems. They stepped down for the good of the Republican Party and the betterment for their state to move along because he has a major distraction. There's no way he can lead that house.
Yeah, well, he's a big distraction. He's like Bentley took down the flag, but he wouldn't take down Mike, right?
Yeah, he's been a wuss about that.
Yeah,
he really has.
I want to get to this next subject here, and one of the latest filings. You know, we've learned something about Sonny Reagan, the former Deputy Assistant Attorney General, who Mark White says is his star witness to prove that Matt Hart, the prosecutor, and Van Davis have been responsible for prosecutorial misconduct. He's their star witness, Barron, and we printed it and you covered it, you and Jack on the radio show. This guy released an email that I wouldn't want my mother to ever read.
I was trying to read through it on air, and there were so many MFs and GDs and N-word this and N-word that I couldn't get through the email. This is an email from Sonny Reagan to Gene Sisson praising the defense team that was being prosecuted by their employer, the Attorney General's office.
Right. I think Sonny Reagan ought to have to refund the money that he was paid by the Attorney General's office to prosecute when he's leaking money to the defense, at least leak information.
Yeah,
I think he ought to be forced to pay that money back.
Well, Mark White says he's their star witness to prove that they're doing something wrong.
Well, that's scary, but on the other hand, that's a good thing, okay? Yeah. I think that's probably a good thing for the citizens of the state of Alabama. But I don't know how somebody like Reagan was not brought up before the JIT committee, and how does he still have a license to practice law when he has totally not upheld the rule of law and has undermined the prosecution office of the Office of Attorney General.
And you know, Mark White used that information.
Well, sure he did.
Used the information obtained illegally. I'm sorry, he's just a sleazebag.
The scary thing is, they almost got away with it.
This was the first time we did find out that they were praising Bill Baxley and Mark White for the work to get the case against Barry Moore dismissed.
Yeah, this was the first information we have that Mark White was actually involved with the Barry Moore defense
thing. You know, and that's just incredible to me that we've said it a lot. It's all been coordinated. This is proof that, and you know, Gene Sisson had the insensitivity after they print the lyrics to a offensive song called "The N-Word with a Gun." That was the title of the song. And he said, our church sang this last week at worship service. We just changed the lyric to deacon with a gun. These are 50-year-old men.
Outrageous.
That's scary. It's egregious.
I mean, does this say that not only does Mike Hubbard not have credibility, but this whole bunch on the defense has no credibility?
Yeah, Mike Hubbard's whole defense is crumbling before his very eyes. It is absolutely crumbling. He's been running around telling everybody, "Oh, it doesn't matter. I'm going to get off." The Attorney General's office, you know, had a bone to pick with me, and this was all political, and I've got witnesses to prove it. These are his witnesses.
These are his witnesses.
The inside job boys that now, thank goodness.
Well, you know, the crazy thing is that Gene Sisson is the one who testified against Victoryland, and Reagan is the one who prosecuted Victoryland. I mean, can you trust anything these guys have done?
The plot just keeps on thickening.
We're going to have to leave it right there. You've been watching The V, the voice of Alabama politics. You can catch new stories every day at alreporter.com. Catch us on YouTube or on your television stations throughout the state. Thank you for watching.